Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Well, this morning we want to let the people of New South Wales, particularly people on the Northern Rivers, the North Coast and the Mid-North Coast, know that once again, as we enter this critical time, we are throwing every arm of government in terms of assistance at these regional communities. In fact, we are becoming prepared to enter the recovery phase once this event passes, and we want to assure the people of northern New South Wales that there will be no daylight between response and recovery when we come to that time. That's an important message that we want to get to the people of the northern parts of New South Wales as they still go through what is a critical time of emergency. Obviously, we'll hear from the Bureau shortly, but there has been a downgrading, but the threat in terms of this critical emergency remains. There is a threat of significant rainfall and flooding, particularly around the Lismore area over the next 12 to 24 hours. So really the message is to still always follow the advice of emergency services at all times. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of people in that part of northern New South Wales who have responded to emergency services, to not just the people who have been directed to evacuate but also advised to leave, to make sure that we are prepared and they are prepared for any onset of any flooding or significant rainfall or heavy winds. We obviously are dealing with several disasters at once because it's not just the onslaught of the actual passing of the ex-tropical cyclone, but of course the heavy wind and the rainfall and the subsequent flash flooding that we're seeing in places like Lismore. We're obviously keeping a really significant watching brief on what's happening with the Lismore CBD levy. There will be significant updates to come in terms of energy and evacuation centres from my colleagues, but I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that works for emergency services, government, everyone putting their shoulder to the wheel in the northern part of New South Wales, the volunteers. I know there's lots of teachers even that are manning our evacuation centres right now as we speak. Thank you to everyone who has followed advice and everyone who is giving up their time to ensure that we can protect lives in the first instance, of course, and property as we get ready to, once this hopefully passes in the next day or so, that we can get all the resources of government ready for recovery. I'll pass over to Commissioner Wassing from the SES for an update.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Could I start also by acknowledging the enormous efforts and resilience of the local community in Mid-North Coast and the North East, and the ultimate professionalism of our volunteers and our staff and the emergency services and all the support services that are working tirelessly with the local community in that area. Today effectively is D-Day, if you will, irrespective of the crossing of the cyclone currently in Queensland. We're still seeing very strong winds, but more importantly, we're still seeing very heavy rainfalls and therefore river rises, flash flooding and continued inundation of many areas. We currently have 131 warnings, 40 emergency warnings, and that equates to approximately 20,000 people under evacuation warnings currently. We expect some of those to potentially increase as we see river rises and continued rainfall today. Since the start of this event, we've had over 5,200 incidents. Most of those have still been in the preparedness in terms of working with the local communities, but we are seeing an increase in terms of response activities, in terms of flood rescues. We've had 30 flood rescues in the last 24 hours. Other than the one missing person, all of those other flood rescues have been good outcomes, but they are predominantly from people driving through floodwaters. Our message can't be clearer about not moving whilst we have this heavy rain and not driving through floodwaters. I don't want people's safety to be at risk, and I definitely don't want my crews or any emergency service crews to have to be putting their lives at risk to save others. It's what they're trained for, it's what they're professionally trained for and what they're very good at, but we do not want that to be occurring. In addition to our focus today, which is around the continuing to work with the local community, I can say that particularly in the Lismore area, I know there's been a lot of conversation today about the levies. The levies have not overtopped. We've had drones in there. We've got crews working in the Lismore area. They'll continue to be operating in that area. The CBD levy and the levy to the south part of Lismore has not overtopped, I can confirm that, but we are getting flooding in low-lying areas in Lismore, and certainly with the Wilson River, the predictions indicate that there will be rises and there's likely to be further flooding, but I'll let Nick from the Bureau talk to that. We're ready. We've got thousands of volunteers and staff, emergency services support capabilities in that area. That is our focus today in the next 24 hours. And we continue to work with the other services, making sure that once we get through this next 24-hour period, that we can continue to work with the community and all the support services in the transition to relief and recovery and get the community back to where they want to be in their homes as soon as we can, but we're not there yet. Thank you. I'll pass to Nick in the Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, as mentioned, Tropical Cyclone Alfred has now been downgraded and is an ex-tropical cyclone. It is still slow moving and will cross the mainland coast between Maroochydore and Bribie Island during this morning. For New South Wales, that means that the risk of damaging winds along the coastal fringe north of Ballina does continue, and the dangerous beach conditions continue today, and they'll only slowly ease. But rainfall and flooding remain the main risk. Overnight, there were widespread totals in the 100 to 200 millimetre range, with higher falls up to around 300 millimetres in the Dorrigo Range area. And we will see further heavy falls today across the Northern Rivers, mid-north coast and eastern parts of the Northern Tablelands. That rainfall will extend further inland later Saturday and during Sunday. While the totals won't be as large as it has been along the coast, it will bring the flood risk to the rivers across the northwest slopes and plains, and they are covered in the current flood watch. Rivers are rising and flooding is occurring across many of the rivers and creeks across the mid-north coast and northern rivers. We are currently seeing moderate flooding in the Tweed, Richmond, Wilsons, Orara, Ballinger and Nambucca river systems. And with the rain, some of those rivers are still rising, and with further rainfall coming, major flood warnings are out for those rivers. For Lismore, and we absolutely understand the sensitivity of this situation, river levels in the Wilsons River are still rising. There are peaks that are upstream that are yet to come through. And that does mean, with the combination of that and further rainfall, that major flooding is likely from around about midday. And as mentioned in the warning, levels near the height of the Lismore CBD levy are possible Saturday afternoon. That situation is being very closely monitored and warnings will be updated as required. Just in terms of the rainfall totals that we've seen, a few specific figures. So Meldrum and Ballinger area up in the Dorrigo Ranges, 300 millimetres in the last 24 hours. Woolleye closer to the coast, 163 millimetres, and Lismore itself was 133 millimetres. In terms of the event totals, locations in the Dorrigo Range sort of region have already received 700 to 800 millimetres of rainfall, and there's further rainfall to come during Saturday. In terms of the outlook for this event, rainfall from this system will move south and west over the remainder of the weekend into Monday and Tuesday. So while some places further south like Sydney do have decent rainfall totals on their forecast, it's not expected to be anything like further north, and the flood watches have not been extended further south. So in summary, while the tropical cyclone has been downgraded to ex-tropical cyclone Alfred, the rainfall and flood risk in particular remains. Rivers are rising and people need to stay up to date with the latest forecast and warning information and listen to their advice from their emergency services. Thanks.
I'll just give a brief update on the evacuation centres and some of the contingencies that we have in place to ensure safe access to drinking water as this weather event moves through. We now have 21 evacuation centres open across northern New South Wales and the mid-north coast. There are 743 people who are staying at those evacuation centres currently, and over 1,100 registered to use the evacuation centres. We have 258 people in other forms of emergency accommodation. That's primarily hotels and motels in the region. We have almost 50 disaster welfare staff who are supporting those evacuation centres, and I do really want to say thank you to those staff. Those people are primarily Department of Communities and Justice staff from other areas and Department of Education staff, so teachers and TAFE teachers who live and work in that region and have come on board to support the evacuation centres, whilst often their own homes and communities are under a lot of pressure as well, and so we really thank them for that work. There were some logistical challenges having deliveries made to those 21 evacuation centres yesterday, but I can confirm that last night all centres had access to bedding and had access to food, and that those are being restocked today. With some of the major road closures that we've seen across the North Coast and the Mid-North Coast, there are issues with our partner organisations moving food and bedding around. The M1 has been closed for some time, and that does provide some challenges accessing the centres, but we worked through that yesterday and ensured that everyone who turned up to an evacuation centre had access to some food and had access to some bedding. And that will continue as we restock them over coming days. I do also just want to say, in relation to water, we have seen some pressure on water through the local water utilities that deliver and manage drinking water and wastewater in these communities. At the moment, that's primarily not due to damage of infrastructure, but it's related to the power outages. It takes power to run water infrastructure and water treatment plants. So some residents have been on boil water alerts. That's still limited at the moment, and others are being asked to conserve water. I want to reassure the community that the New South Wales Government has reached into those local water utilities and offered all of the technical support we can. We have mutual aid agreements with Sydney Water, Hunter Water, and some of our other big water utilities. In events like this, there is pressure as there's power outages and infrastructure damage that's occurring. At the moment, we are confident that we're going to continue to be able to deliver clean, safe drinking water across the community. But again, people need to be clear on where to receive information. Updates are being made very regularly so that if there are any issues in relation to the availability of water supplies, we'll be able to communicate that quickly and hopefully work with local organisations to have any issues resolved quickly as well.
Thanks everyone. I wanted to give an update on the energy situation where the power is out for many households. The most recent update has us at around 43,000 premises, so that's households and businesses that are without power. The issue that we have here is that we're still in the middle of this event and that there is still wind and there is still extreme rain. As you can imagine, having electrical workers in that space is very dangerous. What is occurring is that we are waiting until it is safe to do so, but Essential Energy, with a lot of other partners and a lot of work both in cooperation with the federal government, is making all of the preparation that's ready to go, so that once it is safe to do so, we will have teams going in and restoring power as soon as possible. The message, though, to the community is that you're going to have to be patient. We cannot risk the lives of those workers, and we need to, but know that we're doing everything that we can as quickly as we can. As soon as it's safe to do so, they'll be in there restoring power. It is a challenging time, but I also know that the people of the Northern Rivers and beyond are very prepared for this, and they're ready. But the message today is we're putting everything in place. There's a whole lot of preparation work ready to go. People will start to become operational as soon as the weather calms down and it's safe to do so. But people should be prepared that it could be several days before the power is restored, and in some cases it will also be intermittent. So everyone just needs to be watching with that. In relation to telecommunications, obviously the energy situation occurs with that. O should be working in all areas, but when some of those towers go down and they are affected by the energy supply, they will come in and out. We're obviously working as quickly as, and working with the federal government on how that can be restored and working through, but it is a reality. We are aware of it, and we're really wanting to make sure that O and other access is restored as quickly as possible, and we'll continue to do that. The final message I wanted to give today is actually about waste and the clean-up. It's going to be a huge clean-up. People know that. People in Lismore and beyond have done this before. The EPA has already indicated to the local government, all of the local governments across the far north coast, that the waste levy will be waived. We'll be putting in place and working with Public Works on the clean-up when we get there. But we're not there yet. My main message today is energy will be restored as soon as possible, but it will take some time. And also safety. Please do not go anywhere near a live line. If there are lines that are down, if you can report them to Essential, that would be great because it will help them. But really, safety first for the workers who are going to be working in horrendous conditions to restore power. And I want to thank them for all of their efforts. And I know Essential is doing a huge amount of work behind the scenes. But safety first and power on as soon as we can.
Questions?
Can we just start with, in terms of Lismore and the levy, I don't know if it's best for the Bureau or the SES, but regarding the main levy in town, that's the one where people are going to be watching quite closely. You said there is a potential it could reach the same height. Would that be enough for it to go from overtopping to then breaking if it reached the height of the levy?
Yeah, so because the river's still rising and there's further rainfall to come, indications are that this afternoon it's possible it'll get around that height, and we want to flag that ahead of time, and that's why that was been in the warning since yesterday. We're going to just need to monitor really closely how those peaks come down through that system and what happens with the rainfall the remainder of this morning and through the afternoon period, and that's what will give us the actual final result as to which way it goes. Overtopping, it is possible, and that's why it's being mentioned in the warning, and we're watching that very, very closely.
Perhaps this is one for the SES. There are some people who won't know the difference between overtopping and breaking. Can you just explain that, and as well why overtopping, while problematic, isn't nearly as bad as it breaking?
Yes, I'm glad you asked the question. So when we're talking about a breaking of a levy, we're literally talking about a failure in the levy and a significant rush of water. The overtopping of the levy, which is a risk, as we've just heard from the Bureau, and something that we're planning for, but hope that does not happen, but have plans in place for, and while we've got boots on ground, the overtopping of the levy means that the water level is such that it actually starts spilling over the top, literally spilling over the top. The challenge in Lismore, it's actually a bowl, if you will, and so even the heavy rainfall starts creating some level of actually flooding even in the community and in the CBD. The levy's designed to keep the river, the Wilson River, out, but if that starts overtopping, then you see an increasing of that flood impacts. But we've got boots on ground, we've got drone technologies in there, we've got a range of different emergency services. We're working very closely with our embedded Bureau people, with our intelligence officers that are mapping this out. It's really now up to how much rain we get today and how that flows through in terms of the river system.
What's the plan if the levy does break? I know obviously it seems like it's obviously something no one wants to see happen, but there must be a plan in place if it does.
Yes, effectively it's continuing to work. We do have some people, not so much in the CBD, with the CBD and the preparations have been extraordinary in terms of that, the shopkeepers and the businesses there. There are some people in some of the surrounding communities that have stayed. The vast majority of the community has evacuated. We continue to work with those people that are still in place, and we'll make sure that they're assisted in terms of any relocation or evacuations if the situation deteriorates. Is
it still safe for people to leave at this point if they are still waning up, and would the SES advice be as well to leave if you still can?
If it's safe to do so, it's still to leave now and to evacuate. We still have evacuation orders in place. We haven't mandated that, but we're strongly encouraging people to leave, and there still are options. We just need to be cautious and work with the emergency services. We can help guide people or even assist people where that is necessary.
Minister, would you consider mandating it if we saw a considerable more amount of rain to the point where it would endanger workers?
An operational matter.
Yes, yeah. We do have those powers in terms of those extraordinary situations. It would be at the upper end in terms of worst case scenarios, in terms of very significant. We're not at that point in terms of mandating that, but that's why we continue to work with the communities. they're well experienced with flooding, unfortunately, as we've heard already, and that's why our frontline in-water and on-water and our leadership from the SES and the other emergency services is closely embedded with those communities and those members that maybe still be there. But we're not talking big numbers in total.
In terms as well then of the plan with Lismore, obviously there's a lot of volunteers. We've heard that people are doing jobs that they've not usually paid to do as well, coming from other government departments over. How long can that go on for if this is a protracted issue in Lismore in terms of the response and recovery?
Yeah, it's firstly, it's an extraordinary effort by so many people, as we've heard, not just the emergency service volunteers, the professionalism of those and their employers and their families sacrificing their time with those to allow our people to do that. But it's all the support functions. So there's people within the community that are unable to work, but they're actually in their local community supporting other members. It's the principle of and the great resilience that we have in communities like the North East and elsewhere, and fundamentally an Australian culture. But I think the other bit, how long can we do that for? We've got volunteer protection orders in place that actually assist that from an employer perspective, and we still have large numbers of support. We've got amazing community members that always want to assist through spontaneous or informal volunteering. As I've said before, they can work with the emergency services and with the SES. We have arrangements in terms of how we coordinate that, so it's a safe operation, and that's all the things that are occurring in the back, if you like, that people won't necessarily see, but is there to continue to support them.
Education Minister, a decision on schools for Tuesday at this point, what's the go there?
Well, we've yet to make a decision as to whether the schools that are closed at the moment that are not going to open on Monday, whether they close for Tuesday. That's really, it's mostly about the fact that we need to be able to get our staff who are local residents to the school, and also ensure that at a time where students and parents and teachers and support staff working at schools are focused on protecting themselves and their properties, that they're not worried about getting to school. That'll be a decision that, as soon as is made, will be communicated very quickly to school communities so they can make their parents and staff members aware. I would say, in addition to that, the NAPLAN testing window begins on Wednesday. Schools have a period of time in which to conduct the NAPLAN test, which happens to start on Wednesday. Queensland and New South Wales are doing exactly the same thing when it comes to that. All schools that have been non-operational will get an extension in the period in which to test their students for NAPLAN. No one wants to be worrying about anything like that at the moment, but as soon as we make a decision about Tuesday, that'll be communicated widely.
On the matter of water, can we just learn about where there are pressures on infrastructure and water security?
Yeah, at the moment, it's the Tweed Tri-Council area. So Tweed Tri-Council is the local water utility for those communities, and they have had some pressure on their water treatment plants because of power outages. As I said, there's no infrastructure damage, but the power outages have impacted them. So they have some very localised boil water alerts, and more broadly they are asking people to conserve water, to only use it for essential purposes. And look, as I indicated, once the power issues are resolved, we're obviously working very closely with the teams there at Essential to make sure that that's done as quickly as possible. We're hopeful that the water will be restored more broadly. If there's infrastructure damage, and that happens in floods too, as the waters come down, it can actually damage water infrastructure. We'll work with those local water utilities to have that resolved as quickly as we can as well. And there are mutual aid agreements in place so that other utilities can come in with staff and equipment as necessary to ensure that that's resolved as soon as possible.
And this might be a silly question, but in terms of potable water, can you work with other parts? I'm thinking north of the border is a lot closer in Queensland to bring over potable water to the Tweed Shire.
Yeah, I mean, we can have arrangements to access potable water from different local water utilities. We also have provisions for water carting where that becomes necessary. So we have budget and equipment to deliver water to local communities who require potable drinking water. So all of those provisions are in place. As I said, at the moment, there are some quite local challenges in the Tweed-Shire Council area, but as the power comes back on over coming days, we're hopeful that they will be resolved, and all of the contingencies around accessing water and equipment from other areas, or indeed trucking and carting water in, are ready to go if necessary.
You mentioned that it's quite localised within the Tweed-Shire. Can you just tell us the towns then within the Tweed-Shire?
I think there's one town in the Tweed-Shire Council. I can't remember its exact name, but I will get that to you.
It doesn't sound like evacuation centres are having this issue though.
No, at the evacuation centres, we have water available, we have food available, we have bedding available. We have had some issues. I think half a roof blew off at one of our evacuation centres. There are some winds and you know, damage like that's around. So, you know, we were able, that was in an area where there weren't people staying. We were able to move it around. You know, as I said, we had some issues getting trucks in, you know, with food and bedding yesterday, but we've worked through all of that. You know, we've stood 21 centres up really quickly. We've staffed them. There's bedding there, there's food there, there's water there. A number of them have generators and backup power supplies as well, and by and large, they're operating well as a welcoming environment for people who need them.
Can I just ask in terms of around energy and security, there's about 43,000 homes or businesses without power, and you said that the return to power could be intermittent. It was a very different issue, but in Broken Hill, obviously, we saw kind of generator maintenance become an issue there. Is there any concerns from the government here that the maintenance of infrastructure before this disaster has been an issue?
Look, I think one of the big lessons learnt and why there's been much better preparation this time is that people learnt the lessons of 2022 in relation to flooding and the impact on Lismore and you know, all of the sort of far northeast. So, look, I think the preparations are as good as they can be. We're working closely also with the federal government, who have got additional generators on their way. Obviously, access remains an issue, so as soon as we can clear things up. But no, look, this is a community that is very well prepared. There are obviously generators in place, but one of my messages would be, can people make sure that it's, you know, don't just rip those generators into play until it's safe to do so. It can actually be less helpful. But the bottom line here is there's lots of preparation. Essential Energy have got, you know, hundreds of staff ready to move in. As soon as it's safe to do so, they're gearing up. They've got all of the material that they need ready to go. So, look, we just have, the one thing we can't control here is the weather. Once we understand and the weather settles down, everyone's ready to act, and I think we're far ahead in terms of where we've been previously.
Perhaps that's a good point to bring in the Bureau. In terms of when weather conditions might ease to the point at which recovery efforts can shift, do we have an idea of when these particularly badly affected regions right now might see some reprieve?
Yeah, we certainly do. So it'll be a slow easing of the winds throughout today, and same with the beach conditions. And rainfall's very similar, so still heavy rainfall for the remainder of today and overnight tonight, and will slowly ease. So it's not something where there's sort of going to be a magic time, and those easing conditions will that'll be different across different parts of the affected areas. And I think that's why, as the Minister was saying, the crews are already pre-positioned, and as the conditions abate in the areas that they're working, they'll be able to return to the field. So, but by the time we get certainly late Sunday into Monday, the rainfall is a lot less across all of these areas. There will still be water in the river systems moving down through those areas, but we'll understand exactly what we're dealing with certainly by late in the weekend and early Monday.
I've got no more questions.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.